You've probably heard newborn babies, as well as young children, cry a lot. Who hasn't wondered about this means of expression that we sometimes try to discourage, if not extinguish? From the very beginning of life until language is mastered in all its subtleties, crying is actually the only way a child can express a need, an emotion, a form of communication. And let's acknowledge that many adults still struggle to put into words the nuances of what they feel. But what if tears helped us become more resilient? The definition of resilience, it's the art of navigating turbulent waters, of overcoming adversity. The stress response is an adaptive reaction that prepares us to have an appropriate response to a triggering event, which we call a stressor. We tend to use the term stress to refer to the difficulties a person has in coping with any change. Many people have maladaptive ways of reacting to stressors. Their problem isn't the stressor itself, since it's normal and often desirable for things to change and for there to be surprises, but rather their way of reacting to events. This is the case with people who try to control everything, who lock everything down. They seek reassurance in this way, but in fact, it leads them to fear the future and to lack confidence in themselves and others.
Finding the right time to let your tears out. We all need to release our psychological pee, which consists of our pent-up tears. We also have psychological poop, the words we swallow back, but that's a topic for another article. Of course, it's not always the right time or place to cry, so we hold back and accumulate our tears in our emotional warehouse. All humans have this psychological bladder that allows us to contain ourselves when needed. However, from time to time, we need to empty our emotional warehouse. Otherwise, we poison ourselves from the inside. But how do you know when it's time to empty your emotional warehouse? You'll easily realize it. You'll feel like crying. The mere fact of wanting to cry justifies doing so. No need to try to find another reason. I'll even go further. Sometimes when we cry, nothing really justifies it. It's more of an accumulation, an overflow that needs to be released. Imagine that a psychological bladder can hold 30 milliliters of tears. It could be full of 30 mini sorrows that, taken individually, weren't worth crying over. Just as each sip of water doesn't need to be expelled. However, accumulated, they do require release. Interpreting a child's cries is not simple for an adult. Crying is indeed undifferentiated in the first weeks of life, then becomes different according to the child's needs. Only loving and caring observation by parents will allow them to gradually discern their meaning. Most of the time, responding to tears quickly turns into a search for ways to stop them, without much questioning to decode their meaning. Parents must therefore learn, when their efforts are unsuccessful, to let the child experience the release that crying provides. This is the very basis of the resilience that will be so useful to them throughout their lives.
Crying allows you to let go. Around 18 months to 2 years old, as the child's brain develops, it will be necessary to adjust how you respond to their tears, not necessarily responding at all costs. Language will allow for increasingly appropriate analysis and responses. Always satisfying every whim, as well as suppressing all emotional expression, are not ideal solutions either. In the first case, we will raise a demanding, spoiled child who throws tantrums, hits, etc. In the second case, repression or punishment will harden the child and potentially lead them to become an adult who cries very rarely, if ever. It's normal not to always get what you want, and letting a child cry because some of their desires aren't fulfilled is a liberating act, a form of letting go that is the root of resilience. Allowing your child to express their disappointment and sadness is also an act of love. Allowing a child to express their sadness and cry allows them to let go. After the initial period of frustration and anger, most children whose behavior we tolerate eventually calm down.
they can then very quickly shift to another state of mind and even become very joyful, as many of us have observed. Many of children's desires are impossible to fulfill. Many of their demands can be unreasonable, and the transition from anger to sadness marks this shift of energy toward letting go. If this transition doesn't occur, the child will remain stuck in their anger, continuing to fight until exhaustion, especially if we end up giving in to their demands due to our own exhaustion, or if we spend our time distracting them. Through these tears, their brain finally accepts the irreversibility of the situation, and the child relaxes.
Knowing isn't enough to grieve. When the brain registers that something isn't working, Gordon Neufeld points out simply knowing what's wrong isn't enough to grieve and move on. For example, knowing that you didn't get the job you applied for isn't enough to let go. It's often at this point that resistance and obsessive thinking surrounding the frustration take hold. But crying or expressing your sorrow in words to a trusted person allows you to connect more directly with the emotions associated with loss and disappointment. And this ability develops if the adult we are had parents who not only didn't oppose this normal behavior, but who stopped trying to reason with them, something children can't do before the age of 5 or 6 for obvious neurological reasons. Dwelling on frustration, anger, and rumination are the seeds of our adult difficulty in letting go, likely stemming from habits formed early in life. Emotion and its expression are essential for adaptation, and tears allow us to access a deeper level of feeling. Of course, the time required for resilience can be proportional to the magnitude of the loss, but not always, as we observe significant differences in the time needed among people who have experienced similar hardships. Why can't I cry? Here are some of the main reasons why people can't cry. Child abuse. Children who have experienced emotional or even physical abuse may avoid showing their emotions. This is because they associate crying with the abuse they suffered in childhood. This trauma eventually affects their behavior throughout adolescence and adulthood, which can prevent them from crying. Emotional problems. Long-term suppression of tears can also contribute to the development of disorders such as depression and anxiety, which can lead people to become emotionally numb. This reaction occurs because by suppressing our feelings, the limbic system, which is responsible for processing emotions, can be impaired. As a result, we no longer feel anything at all. Anxiety. People with social anxiety disorder don't want to be seen crying around them. They may therefore be in the habit of suppressing these feelings for fear of being judged. In fact, perfectionists or codependents may also suppress their tears to give the impression of controlling their emotions. Schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a disorder that can potentially affect the behavior of those who suffer from it. For example, one of the most common symptoms of schizophrenia is apathy, meaning that those affected neither feel nor show their emotions. This symptom is often accompanied by a monotone voice or difficulty expressing feelings. Anhedonia. Anhedonia is a very common symptom of depression, although it can be a sign of other mental disorders. People who suffer from anhedonia often show little interest in or pleasure from social activities or physical sensations. In these cases, they may also have difficulty crying. Beliefs about crying. Some people, due to their upbringing or perfectionist personality, may believe that crying exposes their vulnerability or weakness. What happens if we don't release our tears? When we neglect to release our emotional baggage, we risk emotional exhaustion. What exactly does emotional exhaustion mean? It means that by constantly holding back our tears, we become worn down. This exhaustion can lead to various symptoms: irritability, impatience, impulsivity, loss of empathy, physical tension, fatigue, insomnia, like a little hamster on a wheel, and difficulty concentrating and paying attention. These are all symptoms that can appear when we hold back our reactions and tears for too long. So the next time you feel like crying, alarm 1, or start experiencing symptoms of emotional exhaustion, alarm 2, try emptying your emotional warehouse. You'll see the results for yourself.
Don't let yourself be overwhelmed by paralyzing tensions any longer. Take stock of your situation and set achievable, realistic goals. Let go of limiting beliefs like, I'm useless, I'll never succeed, I absolutely have to live up to expectations, everything has to be perfect. There's no need to play the hero. You simply need to accept your limitations and determine what you are capable of. Trust yourself. Transform your weaknesses into strengths. Don't reject failure, but rather learn from it and allow yourself to doubt or make mistakes. In short, act with full awareness, without deluding yourself or underestimating your abilities. When you begin to understand your feelings and emotions, you'll find it much easier to express them in other ways, such as through tears. Crying is the way our body releases its emotions, so it is essential that you learn not to suppress them and to let the tears flow when you need to.